One of the concerns that I often hear from classic car enthusiasts about using small pre-war cars, cars like Austin 7s, Morris 8s, is that modern traffic is just a bit too quick and too frenetic to be able to use these cars safely. And I think that is certainly true when we look at the A roads locally. It's becoming more and more difficult to drive at a speed where you're not keeping up with traffic. And on some of the B roads this is also true, but there are still a lot of little lanes like this one that we're on at the moment, which is between the villages of Great Glenham, Sweffling and Bennell. And as you can see, this is quite typical of the kind of lack of traffic. Single lanes, having centuries old cart tracks effectively that have been tarmacked in the 20th century, and plenty of pull-off spaces here. But I think if I ever get the chance to own a pre-war car, I think I'll certainly be able to enjoy it along these lanes. I wouldn't be able to use it in the way that I use the Vitesses, but this kind of motoring would be absolutely fine. And I think there's still lots of places like this where you could safely drive and enjoy yourself without being worried about being taken out by some SUV coming up behind you. I'm just going to come round towards an area called Silver Lace Green. As you may be able to see, quite a lot of pasture here. The river we're about to cross on this bridge is the Upper River Ore, and it's a lot of low-lying water meadows here, so not suitable for cultivation but ideal for grazing. And of course it makes some wonderful sort of semi-wetland habitat. Yellow is the colour of today, I've decided. We've got lots of daffodils, laburnum, primroses, and as you can see, it's still very early. The beech leaves are still the dead ones from autumn, but everything like the lambs is just starting to burst into life and energy. And it always surprises me how quickly spring suddenly arrives. You know, you can be driving down the road like this one day and the leaves don't appear to be on the trees, and then almost a week later suddenly everything is in leaf, and it always comes as a bit of a shock when you've moved so suddenly from one season to the next. What passes for hilly country in this part of the world, and the landscape around here has hardly changed in the last 200 years. The land we're sort of driving through is all part of what was once the great Bennell estate, and there are examples of some of the estate cottages which we can see in a minute as we go past. And like a lot of the Suffolk estates, they're made up of a large country house and then tenant farms, so farmhouses and then labourers' cottages, and strategically positioned agricultural buildings like tithe barns, stable yards, wood yards, timber yards, blacksmith shops, cartwrights, wheelwrights, all of these little industries, which meant that the farms could be self-sustaining. And each village obviously had its own shops. There'd be pubs or ale houses, often brewing their own kind of beer. And then every so often goods would be brought into the village from outside on carts from the bigger towns like Ipswich or Saxmundham. And of course, just as the blacksmiths give their occupation to the surname Smith, the people who brought the goods in were the carters. And the wrights, of course, could be the wheelwrights or the cartwrights, and those making the wooden barrels would of course be coopers. But the surnames often denoted the occupations and generations of men following one another into their particular trade, whether it was working with wood or with iron. But after the two world wars, these big country houses, as I'm sure I've said in other videos, became unsustainable. The rise in death duties bankrupted a lot of these sort of big houses. The former aristocratic landowning families often retrenched to their flats in London, or they downsized from the grand country houses into the larger farms or farmhouses. And quite often some of these big country houses were either converted into blocks of flats. You see that at places like Great Glenham and at Bennell, the Bennell Lodge, which has been divided into different residential units, or as in the case of halls like Rendlesham or Rushbrook, these houses simply became dilapidated and then demolished. And if you take the example of somewhere like Sudbourne Hall near Ufford, the buildings were simply broken up because the real value was in literally the bricks and the timber, which could be recycled and traded on, rather than the house itself. The men and the women who had kept these buildings alive, literally, teams of servants and tradespeople, didn't want that life again. The real decline was after the Great War, when so many people from these agricultural areas, so many young men were simply lost to battle. But by the Second World War and the advent of the Attlee Labour government, there was a different ambition for young people, and it certainly wasn't in service. And I think that you look back and look at what we fondly reminisce about as being social mobilisation or social mobility. You see the advent of institutions in this country under the Wilson Labour government, like the Open University, the rise of polytechnics, technical colleges, really to skill the population for the new technological era, and agriculture became more mechanised, and whole sort of ways of life completely changed. But these lanes and some of these cottages that we see, this little pair of 19th century red brick labourers cottages, remain. We've moved from the Bennell estate now to the Glenham estate. This is Little Glenham, and an estate that was owned by the Cobbold family, famously the great brewing family of Ipswich. But these estates are all run on pretty much the same kind of pattern or template, going all the way back to the time of the Norman conquest. We're now coming in towards the village of Blacksall, and for those of you who know Suffolk, or are indeed just interested in Suffolk, Blacksall was a home to one of East Anglia's greatest writers of the 20th century, a chap called George Ewart Evans, who, as the name might suggest, was not himself from Suffolk but from Wales, but he married local schoolmistress, and spent much of his time in the 1960s and 70s interviewing the farm workers in this area and getting a sort of living memory account of life before the wholesale mechanisation of farming. And his books like Ask the Fellows Who Cut the Hay, The Horse in the Furrow, The Farm and the Village are a wonderful historic record of life moving at the pace of the horse. And on a day like today, when it's just us in the car and an empty road, and we're sort of trundling along at about 20 miles an hour, it doesn't feel that far away from the time of the great Suffolk punches and the Shire horses that were the four-legged tractors of their day. Blacksall's an interesting village. It is made up of different commons, and these commons were really essential for the survival of the residents. It's one of the very poor villages soil's very thin here, lots of stone and flint, and people literally scratched a living here 200 years ago. And the village historians at Blacksall have managed to unearth so many interesting documents, including accounts of residents who were jailed or actually deported to places like Australia for stealing livestock like pigs or sheep, either just for profit or just for food. And it isn't necessarily an indictment of criminality so much as the will of people to feed their families. And we're now in an era where most of the small cottages, these charming, as we call them, little flint and brick cottages in Blacksall, are second homes or Airbnb homes. And it's very difficult to remember that they were really little more than hovels, and that life was about as poor as it was possible to be in England at that time. And in truth, when I was a young property valuer in the 1980s, I met clients and estate workers for whom that was still very much within living memory. We're just on a slightly faster section of road now, which is going to take us from Tunstall to the village of Rendlesham. Rendlesham was one of these villages which was commandeered by the British government in order to build the Bentwaters aerodrome during the Second World War, latterly handed over to the United States Air Force. But over to my right was the once grand Rendlesham Hall, and pretty much all that's left of it is this gatehouse here that we see, known as Ivy Lodge. But the house is long gone, but there is a bit of a clue, which I'll try and show you in a second. Just up this drive, which would have been an important entrance to Rendlesham Hall, is just a reminder of the kind of grandeur that existed. And what we have to our left and right are this pair of gatehouses to the hall, which are now privately owned houses, but they were built in this Gothic style, and they form this enchanting pair of Gothic gatehouses or lodges, and you can just see with the Gothic arch windows here, and beyond you've got the the gate. And of course this avenue would have gone all the way up at one time. But throughout Suffolk there are all these little reminders of the vanished houses. And if you have a look at one of my very early videos on Sudbourne Hall, you'll see there that what is left of the hall is the stable quadrangle, and buildings like the game larder and the former estate offices, but the house itself has completely vanished. But sort of incongruity of these little gate lodges right in the middle of some woodland, and no clue to the fact they used to be one of East Suffolk's grand country houses just beyond those trees. And all these lanes that I've taken you down are perfect. That was nearly supper. Perfect examples of 25-mile-an-hour roads. Really quiet. You know, this is a Saturday. You know, we could go anywhere else in the county. The roads would be bustling with people coming up to the coast to visit or going shopping, but it's all here. We all have it, you know, entirely to ourselves. So I'm sort of thinking about, you know, the idea of just being able to trundle around here in an Austin 7. It'd have to be a tourer, I think, for me. But it'd be very easy to time travel back to 1936, I think, or even earlier. We're coming into a village called Ufford, and this is on the River Deben, and my guess is that it is Ufford, Ufford, because this was probably the first part of a river that could be forded. No ford here at the moment. There are bridges, but when you go further downstream, the river is tidal, and so I don't think it would have been easy to ford there, but clearly here it was. Just coming past this little gatekeeper's cottage for the railway. And again, you can see we've got water meadows off to our left and right, but it's charming little bridges over the river tributaries and drains, and there is a watering hole here, which in the summer kids go swimming in. I think vainly attempt to fish in. But, if I turn the camera, you can probably see I'm just going to pull over because I'm going to let this Land Rover go past. So hold on, let him go past. It's always gratifying to see other classics out and about, but that one looks like it's very much a working vehicle. Still, lovely. Great little pub here, the White Lion. You can see these enchanting 18th century cottages off to our right. and where I showed you the entrance to Rendlesham Hall with those Gothic lodges, I'm now going to show you the fate of Ufford Place, which was the country house here in Ufford, and we're going to go through these wonderful gates. So you can see, and the fate of Ufford Place was to be demolished and turned into a very upmarket housing estate in the 1970s. We talked when we were at Bungay and Beccles recently about the influence of Dutch architecture, and here you see this wonderful Dutch gable on this house here, and then the village church. Again, very quiet little lanes. And these are the parts of Suffolk that the tourists don't see when they drive through. The roar, if you can hear it, behind me is the sound of the A12. We're just going to leave that behind. Now, this country house does still exist. This is Loudham Hall, but that's definitely private property. We won't be going in there anytime soon, unless of course the owners would like to invite us in. Well, I think I'd probably be a little bit worried about turning up in someone's grand country house in one of the triumphs, because they are a little incontinent. The embarrassment of pulling away and leaving a little spot of oil on the pristine gravel driveway. If I bring the camera around, you can see the other side of it here. It's just extraordinary. So the site of an old abbey, which I'm guessing would have been dissolved at the time of the Reformation. I've got one last estate to show you, and that's the Marlesford estate. And in this instance, we'll take a trip through the village, the heart of the estate. There's a trick question here. What happens when a Triumph Vitesse meets a Ford? Well, the answer is the Triumph Vitesse simply drives through it. But today, I don't think there's any water in our Ford. Yep. River's not high enough to cross the road. Whoop, up we go. So Marlesford Hall, home to Lord Marlesford and the village that takes his lordship's name. One of the prettiest of East Suffolk villages and probably one of the least known. Beautiful church. Wonderful rectory. Georgian, of course. The best part of 500 years, I suppose, this village was pretty quiet. With the exception of a 2-year hiatus. Up to my left, now behind us, in 1943, was a heavy bomber base, home to 3 squadrons of B-17s and about 3,000 American personnel. I think I'm right in saying that the B-17s were powered by 4 Wright Cyclone engines. I'm pretty sure they were the Wright Cyclones. I can look it up and I'll correct in the text, or if anyone knows different. To imagine the sound of 3 squadrons of aircraft, each plane powered by 4 of these enormous Cyclone engines. And the ground must have shook just with them lining up at the end of a runway to take off, and they'd have come straight over the top of these houses here. And I just cannot imagine the contrast between the quiescence that we have today and this village literally at war. As you know, I really enjoy driving my cars fast and making the most of their performance. But I will admit it is very nice sometimes just to get out on a day like today and do these sort of gentle drives and really just to sort of take in these sort of more rural parts of the county. And sort of reflect really that whilst the world is changing very, very quickly and everything seems to be moving faster and faster, sometimes it's not the world that is moving faster, but us. And that actually if we're able to slow down, we get to set the pace of life that we want. There may be something to be said for occasionally shifting into the slow lane. I am still seriously thinking about this idea of a pre-war car, but I think we'll keep that to ourselves. I have no idea what my wife is going to say about that idea. Actually, I do know what she's going to say about that idea, which is why we're going to keep it to ourselves. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this trundle out in Tess, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Take care.